Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to BoxBox F1 Pod. Welcome to the Chinese Grand Prix episode. Super excited to discuss today. Actually, I'm super excited for this episode. I'm not that excited to discuss because it was a bit of a boring race, but I am excited to discuss everything that happened off track and also go through some of the on-track stuff and what it means for the future. While we're chatting, I'm going to be making Shanghai stir-fried rice cakes. I think it's also known as, don't kill me, niangao. So I'm going to be prepping during the digital warm-up, and then we're going to move over to the stove, and I'm going to cook it. And I am drinking, as you can see, bubble tea. I didn't get a milk tea because I decided to make it a boozy bubble tea, or I will try to make it a boozy bubble tea. And I didn't want to do that with milk. I also didn't know how to inject it, and I didn't want to take it out of the can, so I'm going to be using a syringe, and we'll see how that goes. That's fine. Hopefully it tastes good. This is a lychee. I got into a huge fight with my coworkers whether it's lychee or lychee. I thought it was lychee. They claim it's lychee. Whatever it is, that's what this tea is. And now it has some gin in it. Because I was going for like a lychee gin martini, but we'll see. Very good. All right, so with that, let's kick off the Chinese Grand Prix with the digital warm-up. Lap 1, off-duty F1. Okay, so I think I mentioned this last week, but the video wasn't out yet, so I couldn't discuss it properly. But there is a chef online called Andy Cooks, and his videos are really cute. He's always like asking his girlfriend or wife what she wants for dinner. She always has a very specific answer. And then he cooks it for her, and it's always like super gourmet, super cool. I've followed so many of his recipes before. Anyway, for the Australian Grand Prix, he made Wagyu and cheese pies, which I guess is a very traditional Aussie/New Zealand food. And he fed it to the one and only Yuki, because who else would you feed? And he was like, wow, I've never had Wagyu in a pie before. I just kind of wish that I know they were probably short on time and whatever, but I kind of wish that they got to cook it together. And he got to be like, hey, it wasn't just like a text message because they clearly didn't have time to shoot at the same time other than the eating. So it was like a text message thing. He's like, hey, I'm really hungry and I'm in Australia. Can you make me Wagyu and cheese pies? But I loved the collab, and I never thought I'd see him in F1, so I'm excited. I don't know why I never did. You know, when your worlds just randomly collide, that's where I was at with him. All right, moving on. As we found out last week, Isaac Hadjar is a huge fan of Lewis Hamilton. Huge. And there was a clip of them at the driver's parade where they got a selfie together, and everyone's like, oh, Isaac got up the nerve to ask Lewis for a selfie. That's so cute. And Lewis clarified that, in fact, he asked Isaac for a selfie because he was like, it's your first race. It's my first race with Ferrari. We should remember this. Wholesome. I just love how all the older drivers are being such mentors. I guess there hasn't been such youngsters on the track in a while. And so it's really cute to see them all step up. And of course, Lewis Hamilton's dad is mentor number 1, but we'll get to him in a bit. Lewis also, so I saw this reported. I didn't see him actually say it, so I don't want to say that this is 100% true because I didn't watch the full video, but it was being treated as fact, so I'm gonna go with that. Lewis had called out the media for criticizing him for how he spoke to his race engineer, and he was like, I find it interesting that the one time I don't speak nicely to my race engineer, it's all anyone can talk about, whereas Max speaks badly to his race engineer all the time, and no one says anything. I don't know why we had to bring Max into it, assuming he did say this. People call Max out all the time for how he speaks to GP. Literally all the time. He has never like gotten away with it, so I don't know where that comes from. And also, Max portrays himself as exactly what he is. So it's not like as unexpected as when it comes from someone who portrays himself to be the epitome of kindness. Not that he's not, but like that's where the confusion comes from. And also, every report I saw about him speaking weirdly to his engineer, which he was pretty rude, it was all like supportive because everyone was like, well, we all know that it must be rough going from Bono, who you've trusted for like your entire career, to Ferrari Communications, which we all know, not great. So I get why, I get where his frustration's coming from in terms of how he speaks to engineer. And I just think it's like normal for everyone to be confused when the only thing we've ever heard from him is like super politeness, and then be like, whoa, this is not like Lewis of yore. But I did find it weird that he brought it back to Max, assuming he did. All right, I do want to talk a bit about the parents of the drivers. I think it's so funny how everyone interacts differently. I enjoyed Lando's parents, his dad, and then like, so when he's at F1 races, he is in his like casual weekend fits. And then the mom looks like she's the local high school art teacher, but like she probably just makes pottery in her studio and then like goes to Spain on vacation, and that's why she's so tan. I don't know, it's just like a very specific aesthetic, and that's literally Lando's parents. His mom is so high school art teacher coded, and so like I'm exploring my artistic side. I'm gonna make pottery in my free time. Like she looked so cool, and also so, I don't know. Did I expect Lando's mother to look like that? I guess his parents fully check out for how Lando is. I guess it makes sense. But it's also quite different to Oscar's mother, who is full Pilates girly. She is in incredible shape. All of her social media content has been so funny to watch. When she was at the Australian Grand Prix, she was taking pictures with giant posters of Oscar's face. She was taking pictures next to Yuki on the wall. That was really funny because in case you haven't been following, she is also a huge Yuki fan. I would really love to see them meet. I don't think they have yet. And also, the funniest tweet I saw, and I want to preface this with, I think it's super cute that he is traveling with him. But I saw a tweet where someone was like, I'm creasing at a 40-year-old's dad following him around the world, making sure he's settling into his new job, okay? Which obviously being a racing parent or being a sports parent is very different to like, if I got a new job at like, I don't know, Google, and my parents just like came with me to work every day to make sure I was fine. And if I was 40 years old, it is kind of funny. But I really love seeing Anthony Hamilton go to all the races. I really loved seeing him come and console Isaac after his DNF last week. It was really heartwarming to see, and it looked like it was much needed in that moment since there was no one really around him. I know he got his parents were on track, and I know Stefan came to help, and I know the team was probably supportive, but it was just nice to see him run out and console him. Oh my God, do you know you could cry from green onion? I did not know that. Oh. Lap 2, trackside at the Chinese Grand Prix. So Ferrari did their annual calligraphy video, except now they have Zhou Guanyu there. So Zhou Guanyu was teaching them how to do calligraphy. I would just like to say that even though he was not giving very much, I was thoroughly impressed that Ferrari got Lewis to participate in a video. And maybe I didn't see the full one, and the other one, there's a full one where he's like contributing a bit more. But the fact that he's even on camera, 10 out of 10 to the Ferrari admin, because Mercedes sure couldn't get him to get anywhere near a camera, especially in the later years. Who knows, maybe we'll see him in a Secret Santa this year. Also, Alex turned 29 on Sunday today, and everyone wished him a happy birthday. There was a really funny video of the fan stage thing, and it was the Williams boys and the Ferrari boys. And Lando was like, oh, how old are you turning, Alex? And Alex was like, oh, I'm turning 29. And Lando was like, holy shit, you're almost 30. Wow. Like, it was crazy. And Carlos goes, I'm 30. And Lando was like, uh-oh. Right. It was pretty funny. Someone who's 30 and has had that from many 25-year-olds being like, oh, you're 30. Yeah, it's humbling, but I will almost argue that 29 is worse than reaching 30. 29 definitely felt more stressful. And then by the time you hit 30, you're like, you already spent a whole year freaking out and preparing for it. So it'll get better, Alex, promise. Alex did celebrate with his girlfriend, Lily, who, by the way, looked so good this weekend. And there was a clip of her and Alex, Charles's girlfriend, yes, she confused her Alex's, walking through the paddock together, and they looked amazing, both in like their own ways. Lily was wearing like these black pants and this button up, but like cool ones, and loafers. And Alex was, her whole like weekend's worth of outfits were all like slightly Chinese inspired. It was like super subtle, but beautiful. And they were all like really cool fits. One day she also wore like a limited edition Ferrari clutch that was like in the shape of Charles's car. It was super sick. Looked completely pointless. I don't know what fits in that thing, but it looked cool. Speaking of outfits, I didn't see Lewis wear a fit. Like, he wore his Ferrari like clothes. It was kind of crazy. Like the whole weekend, I don't think there was like a fit. Like, he's wearing it super cool. It's like oversized, etc. He's like styling it, but he doesn't have a separate fit, which I don't think I've seen in a minute from him. He must really love Ferrari. Surprised that the comms isn't driving him up the wall. And finally, another fun video was a video of Kimmy Antonelli and George Russell playing Mahjong, and it was filmed really funny. Like, it was like a battle to the death, the way they were filming it. And then like after the like little intros, it goes like, it shows George like squinting and like preparing, and then it shows Kimmy squinting and preparing, and then George goes, "Do you know how to play?" Kimmy goes, "I thought you did." And that's the end of the video. So I enjoyed that. Okay, well, that's it. It's really hard when there's races one after another in this way. I've had like 3 days to collect digital warm-up content, and that's just not enough. And I did 2 episodes right before this, which also covered stuff that was happening. So really, I was short for content this whole episode, but hopefully that 10-minute digital warm-up was enlightening. But anyway, that concludes our digital warm-up. On to analysis. Okay, so kicking things off with the sprint while I make this sauce. The one crazy thing during sprint quali was that Carlos's seat wasn't fully put in. And once that was fixed, I thought everything was going to go well for Carlos. I was wrong. This was a terrible weekend for Carlos, but I digress. The sprint really just sort of previewed what we were going to see this entire race, which was that the track is really rough on the tires, and the track is probably good for a sprint race only because the strategy seemed to really throw everyone through a loop, and that seemed to be where a lot of teams failed when it came to the actual race day. This track is good for like a sprint situation, but the longer they go and the tires wear, and like we have to figure out, is it good for 1 or is it good for 2, as we'll see in the race, things got a bit rough. But the exciting thing is during the sprint race, we got to see Lewis come back in peak form. And everyone's like, oh my God, he never left. I don't think anyone thought he left. The interesting thing about the sprint race is we saw McLaren struggle a little bit. Lando specifically struggle a little bit, but still he rallied in the end and got 1 point for his team. But Lando struggled. Max remained in the top 3 like he always seems to be. Charles really, really struggled. We saw a lot of people struggle. We saw Yuki kind of thrive, and we saw Lewis Hamilton just dominate this entire track. We saw him figure out how to get ahead of Max Verstappen and leave nothing but dirty air behind, so Max just couldn't overtake him. And it was great. It was a really fun, like 20 minutes or however long it takes. And just a reminder for those of you who are new or forgot, but the sprint race schedule is now free practice on Friday, followed by sprint quali on Friday. And then on Saturday, we have the sprint race, followed by quali. And then Sunday, we have the race. Before, it used to be like back and forth, and it was very confusing. I think it was like sprint quali on Friday, quali on Saturday morning, sprint Saturday afternoon, and it was just like you couldn't keep up what belonged to what. But now it like makes sense. And it's also just like, it's fun to see them race in this different context. I think the drivers are like torn between like, is this necessary? And also like, do we need that many free practices? So might as well do this, and it's good for fans. But the top 8 get points in a sprint race. So the top 8 were Lewis, Oscar, Max, George, Charles, Yuki, Kimi, Lando, and Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll got 0 points. I don't know why I included him here. But as you notice, Kimi is the only rookie on this list. Unless I'm stupid. No, Kimi's the only rookie on this list, so go Kimi. And Charles still made it in top 5, but it was rough for him. He mentioned after the sprint race that him and Lewis were on different configurations. So he redid his to more align with Lewis's, and that seemed to help a little bit, but nothing helped as much as his broken front wing, which we'll get to. And then Max. The thing with Max is he will always seem to dominate because his teammates can never get the car into the top 10. So it seems as if he's so good, he's getting a hunk of junk into the top 3 all the time. And he is. I know he's doing an exceptional job, but I feel like it seems extra nice because everyone else is struggling so much as his teammate. But anyway, that's it for sprint. Quali, just gonna quickly list off our starting grid positions. We've got Oscar at pole, followed by George, Lando, Max, Lewis, Charles, Isaac, Kimi, Yuki, Alex, Esteban, Nico, Alonso, Stroll, Carlos, Gasly, Ollie, Jack, Gabriel, and Liam Lawson, who will start from the pit lane after as his car was worked on during park firme. All right, now we're gonna move on to the race, and we're also gonna move to the other side of the kitchen to make the stir fry. BRB. Okay, welcome to the other side of the kitchen. I'm going to get started on aromatics, and we're gonna start talking about the race. First goes the ginger and the white part of the scallion. Green onion, whatever. Okay, so overall, this was a boring race. And while we saw some great drives on the track, most of the action was happening off track, given the bizarre strategy that a lot of the teams were making. And the FIA just got like super involved last minute for no reason. Well, there was a reason there were infringements on the rules, but still it seemed unnecessary for me. So today's debrief will include a highlight reel of some of the best performances or most interesting performances to discuss on track, but it will primarily focus more on those topics of like what was going on externally. So kicking things off with the conditions of the track. Thankfully, unlike last week, the conditions were dry. Although at one point, Lando did get told there was going to be a half of rain, and I don't know if I misheard, because what the hell is half a class of rain supposed to be if class 1 is a light drizzle? What, like, is it like a drop of rain? But okay, never happened, so I guess I'm never gonna find out what half a class of rain is. Also, the track was recently repaved in Shanghai, which caused an unexpected difficulties on the tires. And since there are so many long corners on this track, there was a particular strain on the front left tire, I believe, due to the way the turns go. And this caused quite a bit of issues, particularly in the sprint, I think, because people were going a bit harder than they did in the actual race. And it was still an issue in the actual race, but that's when we really saw things start to like get a little crazy. Okay, so in addition, that's chicken, by the way. I don't know if anyone cares, but that's chicken. So in addition to the track being repaved and like the front tire degradation that became kind of an issue, and it was actually an issue for the race because they had to figure out how to preserve the tires and when to pit, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll get into strategy in 2 seconds. There was a lot of dirty air, which we heard about quite a bit from Lando specifically, as he was trying to get away from George gaining on him and closer to Oscar, but he kept running into Oscar's dirty air. And the dirty air in general made it much harder to overtake on this track than I think people anticipated. But anyway, so the strategy call at the beginning of the race, the one that everyone what tentatively agreed on as they went in, was that it was probably going to be a 2-stopper. But like not so aggressively where they're like, there's literally no choice in this race, we must stop twice. They're like, it's like most likely a 2-stopper, but who knows, it could end up being a 1-stopper. And as the race went on, it became clear that it was very easy to make this a 1-stopper of a race. However, there were some teams that chose to ignore the very obvious signs that they could do this. And the first would be Ferrari with Lewis's strategy. Lewis ended up on a 2-stopper, although he went really fast after the 2-stopper, but they were never able to make up the time lost during the second pit stop. And I also can't tell exactly why they decided this was the best course of action for Lewis, but they did. And then the second team that made this decision was VCarb, or Racing Bulls, or AlphaTauri, whatever the fuck their name is these days. Their name is as confused as their strategy, let me tell you. For some reason, they made both of their cars come in for a second pit stop, but it's not like the point at which they came in was like, oh, we have no choice. The first pit stop we made, like that was committing us to a second pit stop because it was so early in the race. No, they pitted at a normal time, at which point they could have continued on and finished the race without a second stop, but they made them all stop anyway. And both Isaac and Yuki spent the whole time trying to catch up to the gap that was created by that second pit stop, which is really annoying because like Yuki has done so well these last 2 weeks, like the way he's been qualifying, the way he performed in the sprint race, like he is ready to perform, and it's like his team is trying to fuck him over. And it like does not make any sense. It's like they want him to fail. They want him to not, like, I don't know, be a contender for Red Bull, but like, I don't know. It's very bizarre. And another thing about Yuki's race is his front wing randomly broke off in the middle of the race, and even watching the replays and like listening to all the commentary, I don't think anyone knows why it broke. It just randomly broke, and even during the race, right, Yuki was like, why is it broken? And they were like, don't know, but he had to come in again to fix it. And it was like really broken. It wasn't like a little broken, it was like broken. But anyway, even Isaac, who finally made it past the formation lap this week, ended up struggling because they put him on this weird strategy. All right, now let's talk about performances. So Charles had a broken wing, which happened during contact with Lewis in the first lap. Like barest of contacts. They actually could have fully collided, but it got saved at the very last minute. So that was a bit crazy, and he did the whole race with a broken wing, and that's when he was like flying. So everyone was like, does he need the front wing? Maybe we opt out of it for next time. Which, from what I understand, is categorically, from an aerodynamic perspective, not a thing. He will not go faster without the front wing. But anyway, it was pretty funny. But also at a certain point, Lewis was going so much slower, he offered to switch places with Charles, but like wanted to control the whole situation. So like he offered to switch places with Charles, and then the engineer was like, cool, we can make that happen. Do it now. And Lewis was like, I'll switch when I'm ready to switch. And it's like, okay, but you suggested it. Okay. Other performances. Oscar had an amazing race, like from start to finish, just solid performance. Never wavered, calm, cool, collected, but everyone's come to expect calm, cool, collected from Oscar. If Oscar ever freaks the fuck out, we all know it's dire. Lando, however, did have issues. He had issues all weekend. He did manage to rally. He did have an incredible overtake into George right into turn 1 of lap 1. Even in the cool down room, George was like, that was pretty good. And Lando was like, yeah. And then I was fucked. So the whole race, he was doing pretty well. And then he ended up caught in Auster's dirty air as George was catching up. And he was like having trouble continuing. But it seems like it wasn't just the dirty air that was an issue for him. He also was having a brake issue. It was like he couldn't press all the way down. He just had no brakes, basically. I think he had a front... They explained it. I didn't fully understand it. So it wasn't like a power unit issue. It was like the actual brake was an issue, which became a serious concern towards the end of the race. Like, George was gaining on him so fast that if there were just like 3 turns left in this race, Lando was fucked. Basically, he's very lucky that the break lasted to the checkered flag. Half a lap more, fucked. He would have not only finished not second, he wouldn't probably have not finished the race at all. Other shout outs, George Russell has been pretty consistent, not just today, but last week. I saw a hilarious TikTok video, and no shame to this creator. I'm fully on board with Delulu thoughts, but she was like, George has done so well. It was the way she phrased it. It wasn't like just Delulu. It was like, George has done so well this season. He might be driver's champion. And I'm like, it's race 2, girl. Everything is literally still to play for. They say that all the time, but it's literally still to play for. But yes, he's been very consistent these 2 races. Do I think that translates to driver's champion? No. But Max Verstappen has been solid, and I know I just said that it's only the 2nd race, so we can't say anything, but I would like to say this for Max in reverse. Max hasn't lost anything yet. Max hasn't won anything yet. Max is actually very firmly in contention for the championship, as is everyone, because it's the 2nd race. But like, I don't think this means Max is done. I've had like 5 people ask me, like, so is Max done? I'm like, it's the 2nd race. Relax. And it's not his fault. So the McLaren car is like so beyond good that everyone's going to struggle this year to keep up. And now quickly on Carlos Sainz, I don't know what's going on with him. I don't think no one knows actually what's going on with him, because his performance was just like very confusing for someone of his caliber. I know in the sprint race, his seat wasn't in all the way, but like, I think he even radioed to the pit wall at the end of the race and was like, I'm pretty sure I'm faster than this. And they're like, no, we think you are too. Like, no one really knew what happened to him. He just was not fast at all. He was like at the bottom, like bad. But actually not bad, because so many people got disqualified that he ended up scoring 1 point. All right, so now that we've talked about Carlos and all the other performances, I really want to do a quick rookie review, because some of our rookies are in a dire state right now. I'm going to focus on the 2 rookies that get the most shit in the media from their teams. So Jack Doohan, he had an incident this race where Isaac was trying to overtake him, and then Jack unexpectedly locked up, and that lockup forced Isaac off track, which was quite unfortunate because it resulted, nothing actually happened from that. It could have, but nothing bad happened. But Jack did get a 10-second penalty for that, which ended up costing him his position in the race. But in addition to him acting like, even though the lockup wasn't intended, like there was no malintent when he did that, it was an accident. The move he was trying to do was kind of aggressive and kind of, I don't know even know if the word is aggressive. It just seemed kind of desperate, untrained. I don't know, which is not great. Like, he's not even been doing that great on track, which is what's unfortunate for him. Also, what was very weird about this particular incident was that as soon as it happened, a racing bull started going into the pits with a broken wing, front wing, and everyone assumed it was Isaac from the incident. But it was Yuki. It just happened like right one after the other. It was very peculiar. I don't know if this means anything for his future, but I do think it's quite unfortunate that he's not performing that well, because he's got Flavio breathing down his throat, and it's just, anyway, I just feel bad for Jack Doohan. And speaking of people I kind of feel bad for, moving on to Liam Lawson. I don't even know what to say about Liam Lawson. I think it's sad that it took Liam coming into the Red Bull seat and struggling so hard, so quickly, for people to realize that it wasn't Checo. that was the issue, but perhaps it was an issue with a car and an issue with a car that only Max Verstappen could somehow manage to drive. I think that sucks. Checo was definitely treated terribly by Red Bull and kept on way too long, which felt like humiliation almost at that point. And he was treated horribly by the media and the fans, and just like everyone treated him terribly, even though clearly there was an issue with the car. Maybe it was time for Checo to actually go. I don't know, but I think it's because Red Bull took him to the edge, literally to the edge. But I thought that with Checo going, they would not only bring someone who could be a good teammate for Max, who could be molded as a young driver, but they would also work on the car and make it more drivable for people other than Max Verstappen. That's not what happened. They just seem to like continue making a car that only works for Max and barely works for Max, honestly, and just hope the other driver can figure it out. And if not, they're out. So I don't think the issues with the car are all, or the issues with performance is all Liam's fault. I do think Liam came into this like way too hot. He was super cocky. His energy even seemed to throw like Max off a bit with how confident he was. He said stuff about Yuki, but like I could forgive all that. I understand he's young and full of it because he's like not only a race car driver, but I understand everyone copes with pressure a bit differently, and he knows how much pressure is on him to perform well in that Red Bull seat. And it's also probably, considering Daniel is the only driver that texted him congratulations when he got the seat, he's probably feeling pressure and like awkwardness with the rest of the grid, and like that might be coming off like less quiet and humble and more over the top douchey. But I do have to say I feel pretty bad for him given that the first race was like insane weather conditions. So I feel like that could be a write-off. It's been a write-off for so many people. And that means he's only really had one race in a Red Bull. Granted, this race was like really bad. He's not even acting on track, like the energy he puts off, like that song, like I'm Liam Lawson, I'm Liam Lawson. That's kind of energy I was expecting from him, and that's not what he's giving on track at all. But again, it's early days, and I do think it was kind of mean. Ted gave Christian a lot of grief for paying off Checo for this performance, and I think it's fair for him to give Christian and Red Bull a hard time, but I don't think at the expense of Liam necessarily. It's not Liam's fault. And the way he was talking about like, this is what you pay Checo off for. Like, I don't know, maybe encourage nurturing and developing the driver you've decided to commit to. But I think it's like, in general, massively underestimated how much pressure Jack and Liam are under. They've been threatened to be replaced before they even started racing. Before the season started, both of them there were rumors going around they're going to be replaced, and those rumors are just tripling. Now there's rumors that Yuki will replace Liam for the Japanese Grand Prix. They'll like swap places, which is crazy. Liam's basically done one race. That's like deeply unfair. I feel like when you feel like the world's against you, your team's against you, your fellow drivers are against you, it's like fear and threats are not really the recipe for nurturing success unless you're Max Verstappen. That was more on a private scale when he was a kid with his dad and not on a larger public scale. Not that we want to emulate any part of that with anyone else. I'm just saying, I feel really bad for both Liam and for Jack because they're just getting written off so fast and they haven't really had a chance to prove themselves, and the conditions they've been given to prove themselves under are just like high pressure and like they're like under duress. So like who's actually going to perform that well in those conditions? It's just unfortunate. All right, and then there's the FIA. Gabriel, Yuki, Nico, and Alex Albon were investigated for an infringement on their practice starts from the pit lane. There's like a white line they have to start from during practices, and they didn't. So they all got a warning. And then after the race, the FIA disqualified Lewis for his rear skid not meeting the desired thickness, whatever the fuck that means. Actually, I do know what that means. It means that the rear skid block is like, it's also called a plank. It's the underneath portion of the car. And there are regulations for how the minimum thickness it must be. It was clearly lower. I remember this because I believe it was the Austin Grand Prix like 2 years ago. Both Lewis and Charles were disqualified actually for this reason. But coincidentally, Charles was also disqualified today, as was Pierre, but they were disqualified for being underweight. I believe they were both just 1 kilogram underweight. It's hard to say why they were disqualified or why they were underweight, whether they just miscalculated how much fuel they needed, whether Charles's like front wing was damaged, so his car was lighter. I'm not really sure. But Charles was so sad at the end of the race. He drove his heart out. It was really rough. Then he got disqualified after all of that work. He looked so sad after the race. I texted my friend and was like, his sad fucking eyes. And she was like, Charles, I needed no other explanation. No one has those eyes. It's just heartbreaking. He looked like he'd been sweating and crying, and I don't think he was crying, but like he looked rough. All right, post-race, the funniest thing that happened is that Oscar's joke from last year that he's 1/16th Chinese, so this is his home race, has come back in full force after he won it. He won his home race, obviously. The guy doing the post-race interviews was like, is there anything you want to say to your home crowd? And Oscar literally giggled. I've never heard that man giggle. He giggled, and he was like, thank you. It's not a joke, by the way. I do have a great-great-grandfather that's Chinese. Okay, so the results after the 3 disqualifications that we just talked about. Originally, Charles had finished in P5, Lewis P6, and Pierre P11. So with those changes, the results are as follows. Oscar, Lando, George, Max, Esteban, Kimi, Alex, Ollie, Lance, Carlos, Isaac, Liam Lawson, Jack Doohan, Gabriel, Nico, Yuki, Alonso DNF'd quite quickly, actually. And then disqualified were Charles, Lewis, and Pierre. Also, fun fact for you all, this is the second time in F1 history that 2 teenagers have scored points in the same race. The last time was, I think, 2017 or 2018, and it was Max Verstappen and Lance Stroll. The driver of the day was officially Kimi Antonelli. Everyone's confused about it. The commentators are confused. Kimi is confused. Everyone is confused, but I guess everyone's just going with it because it's not like he was bad. He just wasn't like the driver of the day. But I'll take it. He's definitely the rookie of the year so far in the last 2 races we've had. But I think Oscar deserves a pretty good shout out. I also think Alex Albon drove really well. I think Charles driving so fast with a broken front wing also deserves a shout out, except for the fact that he was disqualified, so I don't know if I can count that. Dick in the box, like who wasn't a dick? Ferrari for still not figuring out how to communicate with their drivers without getting back an earful of sass. V-Carb, Red Bull, Racing Bulls, AlphaTauri for their stupid strategy ruining 2 races and also having stupid names. And then, I don't know, Red Bull and Flavio for bullying their little rookies into performing so badly. But anyway, the driver standings as of now are Lando Norris with 44 points, Max with 36, George with 35, Oscar with 34, Kimi with 22, Alex with 16, Esteban with 10, Lance with 10, Lewis Hamilton with 9, Charles with 8, Nico with 6, Ollie with 4, Yuki with 3, Carlos with 1, and then Isaac, Pierre, Liam, Jack, and Gabriel all have 0. And since Fernando DNF'd from 2 races out of 2, he's not even listed in the driver's standings yet. But it's safe to assume he's last. Constructor standings are currently as follows. McLaren with 78, Mercedes with 57, Red Bull Racing with 36, Williams with 17, Ferrari with 17, Haas with 14, Aston with 10, Kick Sauber with 6, Racing Bull with 3, and Alpine with 0. And that's it for the Chinese Grand Prix. Before I go, I'll show you this rather soupy stir fry. Whoa. Dum da dum. Tastes good. Thanks so much for joining me for a crazy first week back in F1. Sorry for the low amount of content for this episode, but it's 2 days after the last episode, and this was a boring race. But in just 2 weeks' time, we're going to be back at the Japanese Grand Prix, and who knows how that one's going to go, because both the races we've had so far have been wildly different, and it'll definitely produce even weirder and stranger results than we've seen so far. Until then, make sure you follow at BoxBoxF1Pod on social to keep up in between races, and my inboxes are always open to discuss or take any suggestions for future episodes. And make sure you subscribe, follow, and share with any potential boxes. Because the more the merrier. So until Japan, Box.